For decades, Bob Weir existed in the public imagination as something more than a musician. He became a symbol, a presence, a living extension of an era that promised freedom without limits and expression without apology. As a founding member of the Grateful Dead, his guitar didn't just accompany songs, it helped build a cultural language that millions would adopt as a way of life. Fans followed him city to city, decade to decade, believing they understood who he was because his music made them feel understood. On stage, he seemed grounded and calm, a steady force amid improvisation and chaos, a man who looked at peace with himself. But the truth is that no amount of admiration from strangers can tell you what a person is like behind closed doors, and no legend escapes the complexity of real life. Behind the applause and the mythology was a man navigating fatherhood, distance, and emotional contradictions that would quietly shape the life of his daughter. Bob Weir's rise happened fast and never truly slowed down. The Grateful Dead weren't a band that toured occasionally, they lived on the road. Time became fluid. Home became temporary. Life was measured in shows rather than seasons. In that environment, traditional family rhythms struggled to survive. When Bob became a father, his world was already moving at full speed, and slowing down wasn't something the culture around him encouraged. His daughter grew up watching her father belong to the world. Fans spoke about him with reverence. Strangers felt connected to him through lyrics and live performances. And yet, at home, his presence came in fragments. He would arrive with energy and affection, deeply engaged, full of stories and intensity, only to disappear again for weeks or months. For a child, that kind of rhythm creates confusion rather than comfort. As she grew older, she began to understand that her father's life followed a different set of rules. There were no predictable schedules, no clear boundaries between work and personal life, no consistent sense of emotional availability. Love existed, but it didn't arrive in stable patterns. She learned to be independent not because she wanted distance, but because distance was already there. While other children could rely on routines, she learned to rely on herself. She admired her father deeply, especially as she watched the impact he had on so many people, but admiration didn't erase the quiet ache of feeling secondary to music, movement, and momentum. The image fans adored, the free-spirited artist rejecting convention, felt very different from the inside. Freedom, when filtered through a child's eyes, doesn't always feel liberating. Sometimes it feels like instability. Sometimes it feels like emotional uncertainty. She has spoken about how difficult it was to reconcile the man she saw on stage with the father she experienced at home. How could someone who connected so deeply with millions struggle to stay connected in the most intimate space of all? That question lingered in her mind for years, shaping how she understood relationships, commitment, and love. For a long time, she kept these feelings private. Speaking publicly about a cultural icon is never simple, especially when that icon has been elevated to near mythical status. Fans don't like their heroes humanized in ways that feel uncomfortable. They prefer legends untouched by ordinary flaws. She knew that sharing her truth would invite criticism, dismissal, and accusations of betrayal, so she chose silence. She processed her experiences quietly while the image of Bob Weir continued to grow larger than life. But silence has its own consequences. Over time, she realized that protecting an image often means suppressing reality, and suppressing reality doesn't lead to healing. When she finally decided to speak, what shocked fans wasn't drama or scandal, it was honesty delivered without malice. She didn't accuse her father of cruelty or neglect. Instead, she described emotional distance, inconsistency, and the quiet loneliness that can exist even when love is present. She talked about growing up with a father who cared deeply, but struggled to show up in the ways that mattered most. Her words didn't dismantle Bob Weir's legacy, they complicated it. And complexity, for many fans, was harder to accept than outright wrongdoing. What emerged from her story was not a villain, but a man shaped by his own past. Bob Weir was adopted as an infant and grew up without a clear sense of biological roots. Attachment, stability, and emotional security were not constants in his early life. Those experiences don't disappear with success, they echo, and often what a person lacks growing up becomes the very thing they struggle to provide later. Bob learned to express himself through music long before he learned to remain emotionally present in one place. The road became familiar, stillness did not. Bob Weir has never denied these shortcomings. Over the years, he has spoken openly about the cost of a life spent constantly moving. He has acknowledged missed moments, imperfect choices, and the difficulty of balancing creativity with responsibility. His regret isn't loud or performative. It doesn't ask for public forgiveness. It exists quietly, in reflection rather than defense. He has admitted that fatherhood didn't come naturally, that it was something he learned slowly, often through mistakes rather than guidance. In many ways, he was still trying to understand himself while trying to be there for someone else. As time passed, the relationship between Bob Weir and his daughter began to change. Distance gave way to dialogue. Expectations softened. She stopped searching for the father she wished she had and began accepting the father he was capable of being. That acceptance didn't erase the past, but it allowed space for understanding. Their connection evolved into something more grounded, less idealized, and more honest. Sometimes feeling doesn't come from rewriting history, but from finally seeing it clearly. When fans reacted to her revelations, the responses were deeply divided. Some rushed to defend Bob Weir, unwilling to let go of the image that had comforted them for decades. Others felt an unexpected sense of recognition. Her story mirrored their own experiences with parents who were loving yet distant, present yet unavailable. For many, it was the first time they saw their personal struggles reflected in the life of someone connected to a legend. That recognition created empathy where defensiveness once stood. What became clear was that Bob Weir's legacy didn't suffer from truth, it expanded. He remains a foundational figure in music history, a man whose influence continues to ripple across generations. But he is also a father who struggled, a human being shaped by circumstances, and someone who lived with contradictions he never fully resolved. His daughter's honesty didn't tear him down, it brought him closer to reality, where all meaningful stories live. This story resonates because it challenges the idea that success compensates for emotional absence. Fame doesn't replace presence, applause doesn't substitute connection. Children don't experience legacy, they experience moments, conversations, and silences. Bob Weir's daughter didn't speak out to damage his reputation, she spoke to reclaim her own narrative. In doing so, she reminded fans that loving someone doesn't require denying their flaws. The music will continue to play, the concerts will be remembered, the legend of Bob Weir will remain intact. But behind the mythology is a family story shaped by distance, love, and eventual understanding. And sometimes, the most powerful truths aren't shouted from a stage, they're spoken quietly after years of reflection by someone who finally chooses honesty over silence.